Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com. I know my voice is congested and wheezy and crackly and terrible. Well, I consider myself in this mode period instrument Dave. I am now the Dave equivalent of a period instrument ensemble playing like romantic music. And if people can put up with that stuff, well, you can put up with me. Anyway, it doesn't matter because the show must go on. And go on it will with the 5 greatest Bach pianists. Yeah, this is going to be fun, isn't it? I can't wait to get your lists. Well, we got to begin with Glenn Gould. You just have to. And you have to because, first of all, the consensus is that he's like one of the greatest Bach pianists that ever existed. That he was a genius. He was a musical force, a cultural icon. He put Canada on the map for things besides maple syrup and other stuff like that. I actually think that Gould was as great as people think he was. I mean, the fascinating thing about Glenn Gould is that here was a musician who was purely a line guy. He was as line a guy as you get, interested in counterpoint. He liked a dry, detached sonority. It had nothing to do with the harpsichord, but it happened to suit a certain style of Bach performance, which really made Bach a legitimate artist for keyboard, piano people like the world over. I mean, think about it. Yun-Chen Lim, for example, just recorded the Goldberg Variations. Every young pianist in the world now plays the Goldberg Variations. Why? Because Glenn Gould did it. I mean, really, that's the reason. It's become a standard repertory work. It used to be so specialized, but not anymore. Bach is in the mainstream, and he's in the mainstream largely because of Glenn Gould. And for that alone, he had to be a great Bach pianist. Now, you may like him or not like him, but no one cares what you think. That doesn't mean he's not a great pianist. A great Bach pianist. He was. And the evidence is incontestable. His acclaim, his staying power, the controversy he still engenders, that's what artistic greatness does. And so I'm very, very happy to include him and not interested in anybody who has contrarian views about the quality of his performances. It's all irrelevant, really, because the jury has decided. It's a done deal. You're not going to get anywhere by trying to make the case that the universe has been wrong for the past century and half a century or 3/4 of a century. So Glenn Gould, Murray Perahia. Oh my goodness, his Bach is gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous. I mean, it began with that Sony recording of the Goldberg Variations, which is absolutely one of the reference versions, and he is such a sensitive, thoughtful, probing artist. I listen to his partitas constantly, like on the train on the way back and forth to work, because they have such depth of feeling, and they're powerful performances. He's just absolutely amazing. His Bach is split between Deutsche Grammophon and Sony, but there's a Sony box that he did all the keyboard concerti, just tremendous stuff. Angela Hewitt, well, we just talked about her, because her big box came out on Hyperion, 22 CDs or something of Bach stuff, including multiple versions of the Well-Tempered Clavier, the Goldberg Variations. And she's an extraordinarily fine artist. She's fresh. She's also thoughtful. She has the technical stuff down pat. She has stylish ornamentation. She really gives you the whole package in the modern Bach sense, what we think Bach playing on the piano ought to sound like. And I listen to her recordings regularly, and I enjoy them enormously. I think she still has the best Italian concerto out there. She's just phenomenal. Anyway, Vladimir Feltsman. This one may interest you or may surprise you. I think Feltsman's an amazing Bach pianist in the romantic Bach style of keyboard playing, more so. It's not that he's not cognizant of contemporary trends in Bach performance. He is, but maybe coming from the Russian piano school, he gives a little bit more, freedom or flexibility of pulse to it. The interesting thing about Feltsman for me was that, remember when he came to this country originally, he was, he defected or whatever happened or immigrated. Everybody insisted he had to do the standard Russian repertoire. And he has continuously reinvented himself as an artist, actually. He does do that stuff, and he does it pretty well. But what he really wanted to play when he first got started was Bach. And people didn't take him seriously. Why? Because he was supposed to be some Russian virtuoso thing and not a Bach pianist. But that's what he was, at least for a substantial chunk of his career. And he made beautiful, beautiful Bach recordings on Music Masters, the Music Masters label, which was part of Musical Heritage Society. And they've held up very, very well. If you don't know Feltsman's Bach, I really recommend you give it a shot. He doesn't sound like anybody else, and he really has things to say in that music. And another Russian guy who's amazing in Bach, Evgeni Koroliov. Koroliov's Bach recordings exist mostly on the Tachet label, the German independent label, where he's magnificently recorded. They sound glorious. And also on Hensler as part of their complete Bach edition. Koroliov is one of those spacey Bach guys. In other words, Sokolov is kind of like that too. He plays in music in his own realm of existence. You don't think about style or technique or things. He just does what he does, and he does it pretty stupendously. I mean, there's a lyrical impetus to his Bach. Even in like the Well-Tempered Clavier, the things that are, supposedly more sort of formalistic, where he manages to characterize the music and to phrase it in such an individual way. It's absolutely beautiful. And he's been very, very well represented on disc. And I think that, again, if you don't know Koroliov's Bach, you owe it to yourself to check it out, because I think you're going to be very, very pleasantly surprised. And those of you who are freaking out because we haven't talked about the harpsichord, don't worry. There is, or will be, a Bach video of greatest Bach harpsichordists as well, because you really do have to divide it into two. It wasn't like Scarlatti, where we could combine them and have some harpsichord people and some keyboard people. With Bach, there are two really sort of separate schools, and I think we need to address them that way. So these are the pianists. And again, I apologize for the voice, but like I said, this is period instrument, Dave. This is an ancient instrument you're hearing. So keep on listening, friends. Thanks so much for joining me. Take care.